One afternoon in the suburbs of Sacramento, when the sound of an out-of-tune guitar cut through the air. My teenage son, Gabriel, with his messy hair and defiant gaze, was playing an old guitar in his room. That room was a chaos of rock band posters and scattered clothes, a reflection of his inner turmoil. The music was his quiet rebellion, a way to express what he couldn't say in words. I stood there, peeking through the half-open door, my heart a mixture of worry and pride. I called out to him, my voice firm but laced with motherly tenderness, asking if he could help outside after practicing. Gabriel, lost in his chords, barely looked up as he asked for 5 more minutes. I sighed, knowing it was futile to argue with him about music. It was like trying to separate a bear from honey, impossible and potentially painful. I headed to the kitchen, where a pot of beans was slowly simmering, filling the house with a comforting aroma that reminded me of my own childhood. Later, as we sat down for dinner, the TV was broadcasting a music talent show. Gabriel couldn't tear his eyes away from the screen, each performance nurturing his dreams. He asked, more to himself than to me, if he thought he could stand there one day. My heart ached with a mixture of hope and fear as I encouraged him, reminding him that everything has its time and there was still much to learn. Gabriel nodded, but I could see the restlessness in his eyes, the part of him that wanted to break free from this simple life and dive headfirst into the world of music. After dinner, we sat in our small living room, the TV still on, but both of us lost in our own thoughts. The silence between us was heavy with unspoken dreams and fears. I broke the silence, sharing with Gabriel that I too had dreams of being a singer when I was young. My eyes misted over with memories of a life I'd left behind, choices I'd made that led me here. Gabriel turned to me, surprise written all over his face, asking why I'd never told him before. I explained that life happens, that we make choices, and he was my best choice. My words must have touched something in Gabriel because he moved closer and hugged me tight. He promised, with determination in his eyes, that he'd make me proud someday. Later that night, while Gabriel was in his room, I found myself going through an old box filled with photos and memories. I came across a picture of my younger self with a man holding a guitar. Gabriel, passing by in the hallway, stopped and asked who the man in the photo with me was. I hesitated, looking at the photo with a mix of emotions, nostalgia, regret, and a twinge of something I couldn't quite name. I vaguely answered that he was a friend I knew long ago, a musician.
Gabriel noticed his mother's unease, and though he yearned to know more, something in Laura's expression made him hesitate. He returned the photograph, and they both sank into an uncomfortable silence. Lying in bed that night, Gabriel found sleep elusive. The image of the man in the photograph resonated in his mind, raising questions about who he was and why his mother had been so visibly shaken. He resolved to learn more about Laura's past, sensing that somehow it might also be part of his own story. On a sultry evening, Gabriel's guitar music penetrated the thin walls of their modest home in the suburbs of Sacramento. The sound was raw with emotion, filled with the kind of rebelliousness that only a teenager could express. In the living room, Laura sat poring over the monthly bills, her face etched with worry. The stack of envelopes before her seemed to grow taller with each passing moment, a physical manifestation of their financial struggles. As she calculated and recalculated, trying to make ends meet, the poignant strains of Gabriel's music served as a bittersweet backdrop to her concerns. She couldn't help but wonder if her son's passion for music would lead him down a path similar to the one she had once contemplated, and whether that path would bring him joy or heartache.
One night, the sultry air thick with the sound of Gabriel's guitar piercing through our thin walls. It was well past midnight, and I called out to him, raising my voice to be heard over the music, reminding him that he had school the next day. His response, a defiant shout for just one more song, echoed through the house, a testament to his unwavering passion for music. That passion, I realized with a heavy heart, had become an obsession, often overshadowing his studies and other responsibilities. I sighed, feeling the weight of single parenthood pressing down on my shoulders like a lead blanket. I knew I needed to be firm, but dealing with a rebellious teenager had left me exhausted, my nerves frayed like an old guitar string. Mustering what little energy I had left, I stood up and walked to Gabriel's room, opening the door with a mixture of determination and trepidation. I told him that enough was enough, that he couldn't live on music alone, and that his studies were important too. My voice betrayed my frustration and bewilderment, emotions that had become all too familiar in recent months. Gabriel stopped playing and looked at me with eyes that seemed to hold a universe of disdain. He told me I didn't understand, that music was everything to him, and that he didn't need school to become a musician. His words hit me like a physical blow, leaving me breathless and hurting. After a tense silence that seemed to stretch for an eternity, I left the room, leaving Gabriel alone with his thoughts. I returned to the living room, my chest tight with a mix of emotions I couldn't quite name. I wanted to support Gabriel's dreams, truly I did, but the fear of watching him fail was a constant presence in my heart, like a shadow that never quite fades. My mind wandered to the faded photograph I'd seen earlier in the box of memories, the one of me and the man Gabriel didn't know. "Your father was a dreamer too," I whispered to myself, feeling hot tears trail down my cheeks. And look where that got us. The next morning, I woke up early, Gabriel's guitar still echoing in my head like a haunting melody. I went through the motions of making coffee, the mechanical movements a poor disguise for the anxiety churning inside me. Gabriel, exhausted from the night before, was still deep in sleep. As the clock ticked closer to 8, I decided it was time to wake him. I called out to him from the kitchen, but was met with silence. When I entered his room, I found him surrounded by sheet music and music books, dead to the world. I gently shook him awake, telling him he couldn't miss another day of school. Gabriel slowly opened his eyes, irritation clear on his face at being disturbed. He mumbled for me to let him sleep, claiming school wouldn't teach him anything he didn't already know. I felt frustration bubbling up inside me, threatening to spill over like a pot left too long on the stove. I argued that he needed to apply himself in school, that it wasn't just about math or history, but about preparing for life. But Gabriel just groaned in discontent, turning away from me. I left the room feeling defeated, knowing that Gabriel's rebellion was becoming a serious issue. As I stood in the hallway, my mind raced with thoughts of how to guide him onto the right path, feeling like a ship lost at sea without a compass.
That afternoon, when Gabriel finally awoke, the atmosphere between mother and son was thick with tension. Gabriel avoided meeting Laura's eyes, his gaze darting around the room like a trapped bird seeking escape. Meanwhile, Laura struggled to maintain her composure, her hands busying themselves with household chores to hide their slight trembling.
The tension between Gabriel and me so thick you could cut it with a knife. I tried to explain to Gabriel that I understood his love for music, but that it couldn't be his only priority. My words felt like pebbles thrown into a vast ocean, barely making a ripple in his world. Gabriel was so immersed in his own universe, convinced that his musical talent was all he needed. That night, alone in the living room, I allowed myself a moment of weakness. Tears flowed freely as I thought about the photograph in the box, a snapshot of a past I'd tried so hard to forget. In the quietness of the night, I offered a silent prayer, begging that Gabriel's passion for music wouldn't lead him down the same painful path as his father.
In the quiet of his room in their modest Sacramento apartment, Gabriel sat hunched over his guitar, his fingers coaxing out a melancholy melody that mirrored his conflicted emotions. The recent argument with Laura had opened his eyes to the reality of his mother's expectations, yet music still called to him like a siren's song, an irresistible force he couldn't ignore. Each note he played seemed to vibrate with the tension between his dreams and his mother's fears.
When I walked into Gabriel's room, I found him still playing his guitar. The melody he was creating was hauntingly beautiful, filled with raw emotion that seemed to pour straight from his soul. I approached him quietly, not wanting to break the spell his music had cast, and sat down beside him. When the last notes faded away, I couldn't help but tell him how beautiful his music was, how much of himself I could hear in every note. Gabriel stopped playing and looked at me, his eyes searching mine for sincerity. He asked if I really meant it, if I truly believed he could make it. My heart ached with the weight of his hope and uncertainty. I took his hand in mine, feeling the calluses formed by hours of practice. I told him that I believed in him, that I always had. But I also shared my worries as a mother, explaining that life wasn't just about chasing dreams, but also about being prepared for the journey. It was like walking a tightrope, trying to balance encouragement with caution. Gabriel nodded, and I could see understanding dawn in his eyes. He promised to try and find a balance, to focus more on school while still keeping music as an essential part of his life. His words were filled with a new determination that both thrilled and terrified me. I smiled, feeling a mix of relief and pride wash over me like a warm wave. That night, as I got ready for bed, I allowed myself to believe in Gabriel's future. I knew the road ahead would be filled with challenges, but also with possibilities as vast as the night sky. As I listened to the last chords of Gabriel's guitar fade into the night, I made a silent promise to stand by him, come what may. The next morning dawned bright and clear, a new day full of promise. Gabriel and I were in the kitchen, sipping coffee in comfortable silence. I noticed his school books open beside him, a testament to his promise to balance music and studies. Suddenly, the quiet was broken by the ping of Gabriel's phone. I watched as he read the message, his eyes lighting up like Christmas morning. He could barely contain his excitement as he told me he'd been selected to compete on a TV music talent show. I stood up, my heart bursting with joy, and hugged him tightly. I told him I knew his hard work would pay off, my voice thick with emotion. Gabriel, buzzing with excitement, started talking about ideas for his presentation. He needed a new song, he said, something that could truly express who he was. I nodded, smiling, assuring him that with his talent, he would create something wonderful. Over the next few days, I watched in awe as Gabriel threw himself into composing new music. Every spare moment was dedicated to perfecting chords and lyrics. I did my best to help, offering opinions and encouragement whenever I could. As I watched my son pour his heart and soul into his music, I felt a mix of pride and anxiety. This was his moment, his chance to shine, and I prayed with all my heart that the world would see the incredible talent I saw in him every day.
As news of Gabriel's upcoming TV appearance spread through their Sacramento neighborhood, a wave of excitement rippled through the close-knit community. The quiet streets of their suburban area suddenly buzzed with a new energy as neighbors shared the news over backyard fences and during chance encounters at the local grocery store. Laura found herself stopped on her daily walks by well-wishers, each eager to express their support for Gabriel.
The night before Gabriel's big performance, the air was thick with anticipation, and the porch creaked under us as we sat together, looking up at the stars. I tried to hide my own anxiety as I asked Gabriel if he was ready for tomorrow. He nodded, his eyes fixed on the night sky, and told me he was prepared to give it his all. As I hugged him, I felt a whirlwind of emotions, excitement, pride, and a gnawing fear that I couldn't quite shake. I told him I was proud of him, no matter what happened tomorrow. Those words felt both true and inadequate at the same time. When the big day finally arrived, I could see the nervousness radiating off Gabriel in waves. The venue seemed enormous, like a gladiator's arena where my son was about to face his greatest challenge. I held his hand tightly as we walked in, hoping to transfer some calm through our touch. Backstage, Gabriel's fingers trembled slightly as he tuned his guitar. I whispered words of encouragement, telling him to breathe deeply and just do what he does best. As I kissed his forehead, I prayed silently that my words would give him strength. When Gabriel's turn came, I watched him ascend the stage, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure everyone could hear it. The bright lights seemed to swallow him whole, and for a moment, I lost sight of my boy in the glare. As he began to play, I held my breath, willing each note to be perfect. At first, everything seemed fine, but then I saw it, the slight hesitation, the missed note. My stomach dropped as I watched Gabriel's confidence crumble note by note. Each mistake felt like a physical blow, and I wanted nothing more than to rush onto that stage and shield him from the world. but I knew this was a moment he had to face alone. I could feel the audience growing restless, their expectations turning to disappointment. When Gabriel abruptly ended his performance and fled the stage, it took every ounce of my willpower not to run after him immediately. Backstage, I found him devastated, tears streaming down his face as he told me he'd ruined everything. I held him tightly, my own heart breaking as I tried to comfort him with words that felt hollow even to my own ears. The drive home was silent, the stars that had seemed so bright with promise now dim and distant. As I watched Gabriel disappear into his room, I knew this night would leave a scar on his journey. Yet, I also hoped it would become a valuable lesson, a stepping stone rather than a stumbling block. All I could do was pray that he would find the strength to keep chasing his dreams, despite this setback. That night, as I lay awake listening for any sound from Gabriel's room, I realized that sometimes the hardest part of being a parent is watching your child face disappointment and knowing you can't shield them from it. All you can do is be there, ready to pick up the pieces and help them rebuild their dreams, one note at a time.
In the days following Gabriel's disastrous performance, a heavy silence fell over the modest Sacramento home. The young musician, once so vibrant and full of dreams, now seemed to retreat into himself, like a snail withdrawing into its shell. Gabriel avoided his guitar, the instrument that had once been an extension of his very soul, as if it were a painful reminder of his public failure.
The quiet days after Gabriel's performance, I watched him with a worried heart as he retreated into himself. I knew he needed time to process his emotions, but it was hard for me to see my vibrant boy so subdued. One peaceful afternoon, I found Gabriel in his room, staring at the guitar tucked away in the corner. My heart ached at the sight of him, looking so lost and defeated. I gently told him that one failure couldn't define him, my voice barely above a whisper as I sat down next to him. I reminded him that everyone fails sometimes, and what matters is how we respond. Gabriel looked at me then, and I could still see the remnants of that dreadful night in his eyes. His voice trembled as he confessed how embarrassed he felt, as if all his efforts had been meaningless. I took his hand in mine, feeling the calluses from hours of practice, and told him that his efforts meant everything. I assured him that this experience would make him stronger and more resilient. I reminded him of his talent and urged him not to give up, even in the face of difficult moments. My words seemed to spark something in Gabriel, and he picked up his guitar, feeling its familiar comfort. As he began to play softly, I felt each note was a small victory against disappointment. I couldn't help but smile, seeing the flame of passion for music reigniting in my son. Gabriel's voice was filled with determination as he promised to keep trying, to not let this failure defeat him. I saw a new resolve shining in his eyes, reminding me of the determined little boy who first picked up a guitar. I nodded in approval, assuring him that I would be there to support him every step of the way.
With a renewed determination not to give up, Gabriel threw himself into his music with fresh vigor. The modest Sacramento home once again filled with the sounds of strumming guitars and softly sung melodies. Gabriel spent hours in his room, hunched over his guitar, his fingers dancing across the strings as he honed his technique. Scattered around him were notebooks filled with scribbled lyrics, each page a testament to his creative resurgence. Laura, meanwhile, did her best to maintain a quiet and supportive atmosphere in the house.
One day, I was standing in our small kitchen, the smell of simmering tomato sauce filling the air. I was wiping my hands on my well-worn apron when Gabriel appeared, clutching sheet music and practically vibrating with excitement. His eyes were shining, reminding me of when he was a little boy showing off a new toy. When he asked if he could show me something, I nodded, my heart already swelling with anticipation. As Gabriel began to play, I felt the world around us fade away. The soft, emotion-filled melody washed over me, telling the story of my son's inner journey. I could hear his struggles, his hopes, and his determination in every note. It was like watching his heart unfold through music, and I found myself blinking back tears. When the last note faded, I told him how wonderful it was, my voice thick with emotion. Gabriel looked at me, seeking approval, asking if I thought he was improving. In that moment, I saw both the confident musician and the vulnerable child in his eyes. I assured him that he was getting so much better, that I'd seen all his hard work and how it was making a difference. The smile that lit up his face was like sunshine breaking through clouds. Inspired by his new music and my support, Gabriel made a decision that filled me with both pride and apprehension.
He set up his smartphone in the living room of their modest Sacramento home, the same space where he had practiced countless hours. With a deep breath, he began to play his new composition, his fingers moving deftly over the guitar strings. The melody that filled the room was a far cry from his televised performance, showcasing his growth and renewed passion. After a few takes, Gabriel uploaded the video to his social media accounts. While his TV appearance hadn't gone as planned, it had given him a small following, curious to see what he would do next. To Gabriel's surprise, the video began to gain traction almost immediately. The comments section filled with positive feedback and words of encouragement. Viewers praised his resilience and the emotion in his music.
Gabriel called out to me, his voice filled with a mixture of excitement and disbelief. "Mom, come look at this," he said, and I could hear the tremor of hope in his words. As I leaned over his shoulder to look at his phone, my heart skipped a beat. The screen was filled with comments, likes, and shares, a virtual tidal wave of support for my son's music. I felt a lump form in my throat as I read comment after comment praising Gabriel's talent and resilience. A proud smile spread across my face, and I had to blink back tears of joy. "You're touching people's hearts, Gabriel," I told him, my voice thick with emotion. "Your music is moving them." I watched as the realization dawned on Gabriel's face. It was like seeing a flower bloom in fast motion, the way his expression transformed from uncertainty to a dawning sense of achievement. For the first time in weeks, I saw a real spark of hope in his eyes. Maybe, just maybe, he could really do something with his music. When Gabriel turned to look at me, I was overwhelmed by the gratitude I saw in his face. "Thank you, Mom, for everything," he said, and in those simple words, I heard volumes. I returned his gaze with a warm smile, feeling a love so deep it almost hurt. "I'd do anything for you, son," I replied, and I meant every word.
As Gabriel's popularity on social media continued to grow, new challenges began to emerge for the young musician. The demands of school still weighed heavily on him, but he was now nearing graduation. Laura watched with a mixture of concern and pride as Gabriel tried to balance his budding music career with his academic responsibilities. In their modest Sacramento home, the sound of guitar strumming often mingled with the rustling of textbook pages. One afternoon, just after returning from his last day of school, Gabriel found a letter waiting for him. It was from a small local record company that had taken an interest in his work. As he read their proposal to record some of his songs, his eyes lit up with excitement.
One day, Gabriel came running to me, his eyes shining with an excitement I hadn't seen in years. "Mom, you won't believe this," he shouted, waving a letter in his hand like it was a winning lottery ticket. As I carefully read the letter, I felt a whirlwind of emotions, pride, excitement, and a gnawing worry that I tried to keep at bay. I told Gabriel how wonderful this opportunity was, but I couldn't help adding a note of caution. The music world could be a treacherous place, and I was determined to protect my son from exploitation. Gabriel nodded, understanding my concerns, and it warmed my heart to see how much he'd matured. Together, we decided to seek advice before making any decisions. It felt like we were embarking on a new adventure, one that filled me with both hope and trepidation. We scheduled a meeting with the record company, and I threw myself into preparing, determined to understand every condition and protect Gabriel's interests. The meeting itself was a whirlwind of information. I watched Gabriel, seeing both the overwhelmed teenager and the excited musician in his eyes. The company wanted him to record 3 songs and promote them at local events. It all sounded promising, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we were stepping into unknown territory. On the drive home, Gabriel and I talked about the next steps. I reminded him that we needed to consider how this would affect his life going forward. Gabriel, still absorbing the day's excitement, nodded in agreement. He promised to make a plan, and I felt a surge of pride at his maturity.
In the days that followed, Gabriel found himself caught in a whirlwind of activity. The young musician's time became increasingly scarce as he juggled decisions about continuing his college career, self-promotion efforts, and recording sessions. Laura, ever attentive, did her best to support her son in any way she could. She prepared nutritious meals to keep him going and offered words of encouragement when she saw his spirits flagging. Their modest Sacramento home became a hub of creative energy, with Gabriel's music spilling out from his room at all hours. One evening, as Gabriel sat at the kitchen table reviewing his notes, the toll of his hectic schedule was evident on his face.
One night, I was watching Gabriel hunched over his notes at the kitchen table. The bags under his eyes were a testament to the long hours he'd been putting in, and my heart ached to see him pushing himself so hard. I approached him, my worry probably written all over my face. "You're overdoing it, Gabriel," I said softly, placing a hand on his shoulder. "I don't want you sacrificing your health for this." When he looked up at me, I could see the exhaustion in his eyes, but there was also a flicker of recognition. He knew I was right, even if he didn't want to admit it. Gabriel told me he understood, but he felt so close to realizing his dreams. He couldn't slow down now, he said, his voice a mix of determination and fatigue. I sat down next to him, feeling the weight of what I was about to say. "There's something I need to tell you," I began, my heart racing. "I don't talk about him much, but your father was the same way." The words felt heavy on my tongue, memories of a past I tried to forget bubbling to the surface. He was always chasing his dreams, but he never learned to stop and breathe. I paused, gathering my thoughts. "You have incredible talent, Gabriel. But talent needs nurturing, and that includes taking care of yourself."
Gabriel pondered Laura's words. He knew she was right, but the idea of slowing down frightened him. For a moment, he wondered where his father might be. But Gabriel was too tired to dwell on that thought.
I watched Gabriel intently, his young face etched with determination and worry. As his mother, I could feel the weight of his ambition and the fear of missed opportunities pressing down on him. "I just want to make the most of this chance, Mom," he said, his voice tinged with a desperation that tugged at my heart. "I feel like if I don't do it now, I might never get another shot," he continued, his eyes pleading for understanding. I reached out and took his hand, feeling the warmth of his skin against mine, remembering when those fingers were tiny and grasping at my own. "You might be right, Gabriel," I said softly, trying to balance encouragement with caution.
In the days that followed, Gabriel tried to follow his mother's advice. He adjusted his schedule to strike a better balance between music and life. Laura continued to be his safe harbor, offering unconditional love and support. Gabriel's routine had stabilized between recording and music work, but one afternoon, something unexpected happened. Laura, who usually waited at home with a snack after Gabriel's performances, wasn't there. Worried, Gabriel began to search for her when a neighbor approached with a grave expression. "Gabriel, your mother's fallen ill and been taken to the hospital," the neighbor said with concern. Gabriel felt the ground disappear beneath his feet. Leaving everything behind, he rushed to the hospital. Fear and anxiety dominated his thoughts. At the hospital, Gabriel found Laura lying in bed, looking fragile and exhausted. The doctors explained she had suffered a mild stroke. "She needs rest and care," they said. "We'll also conduct additional tests to understand the extent of the problem." In the following days, Gabriel divided his time between college, hospital visits, and recording sessions. The weight of the situation began to take a serious toll on him. Music, which had always been his escape, now felt like a difficult job. One night, while Laura slept in the hospital, Gabriel sat by her bed, gently holding her hand. "I don't know what to do, Mom," he whispered, knowing she couldn't hear. "I feel like I'm losing everything." How can I keep chasing my dreams when the most important person in my life is fighting for her health? Gabriel sat there for hours, lost in thought. Eventually, he fell asleep with his head resting on Laura's bed. That night, in the quiet hum of the hospital, Gabriel began to question everything he had planned for his life. Music was still his dream, but reality was now presenting challenges he had never imagined. Over the next few days, Laura's condition stabilized, but the need for additional tests and future treatment loomed over Gabriel like a cloud. He tried to maintain his routine, but every note he played on his guitar seemed tinged with a deep melancholy, reflecting his inner turmoil. Alone at home, Gabriel found himself at an emotional crossroads. Music, his passion and refuge, now seemed like an uncertain path. His thoughts often turned to Laura, her strength and sacrifices. She gave up so much for me, he thought. And now, when she needs me most, I feel like I'm letting her down. One afternoon, while visiting Laura in the hospital, Gabriel expressed his doubts.
I lay there in the hospital bed, feeling weak but oddly clear-headed. Gabriel sat beside me, his face etched with worry and conflict. I could see the storm raging in his eyes, the same eyes that used to light up at the mere mention of music. He told me he wasn't sure he could continue with music. His words felt like a punch to my gut, more painful than any physical discomfort I was experiencing. He said it felt selfish to pursue his dreams while I was here fighting for my health. Oh, how my heart ached for my boy, torn between his passion and his love for me. I summoned all my strength and grasped his hand, feeling its warmth against my frail fingers. My darling, I said, my voice barely above a whisper, don't give up your music for me. I paused, taking a shaky breath, remembering the first time I heard him play. It's a part of you, I continued, as much as your heartbeat or your breath. I felt a tear slip down my cheek as I added, I'm fighting here, and you must keep fighting out there. Gabriel shook his head, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. He insisted he should be here with me, that I was the priority now. His devotion warmed my heart, but it also filled me with a bittersweet ache. I managed a gentle smile, remembering all the times I'd put him first over the years. You are my priority, Gabriel, I said softly, you always have been. I squeezed his hand, willing him to understand. But seeing you fulfill your dreams gives me strength, I explained, thinking of how his music had always been a beacon of hope in our lives. Don't give up now, I pleaded, hoping my words would reach the part of him that still yearned to create.
That conversation left Gabriel with mixed emotions. He knew Laura was right, but guilt and worry gnawed at him. That night in his room, Gabriel began composing a song dedicated to his mother. Notes flowed from his guitar, each carrying a fragment of his journey, struggles, and unconditional love for Laura. It was a tribute, a thank you, and a reminder that even in the darkest moments, music could be a guiding light. As Laura's health slowly improved, Gabriel found a new direction in his music. The song he dedicated to her was nearly complete, an honest reflection of his emotions and experiences. While working on his music, an unexpected event knocked on his door. One day, after a long recording session, Gabriel returned home to find a stranger waiting for him. The charismatic middle-aged man introduced himself as Roger, a music producer who had seen Gabriel's videos on social media. Gabriel, I'm impressed by your music. You have raw talent that needs to be polished, Roger said, offering Gabriel an opportunity to work on bigger projects. Feeling surprised and delighted, Gabriel experienced a mix of excitement and uncertainty. Thank you, but my mom is sick, and I'm not sure if this is the right time for that, he replied. His loyalty to his mother weighed heavily on his decision. Roger, showing understanding, suggested an informal meeting to discuss possibilities. Think about it, Gabriel. This could be a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for you, Roger said. After Roger left, Gabriel was caught in a whirlwind of thoughts. The offer was tempting, but he didn't want to hinder his mother's recovery. That night, Gabriel visited Laura in the hospital and shared the news with her.
As I lay in my hospital bed, I could sense Gabriel's conflicted emotions before he even spoke. His eyes, usually bright with passion, now held a mixture of excitement and worry that made my heart ache. "Mom," he began, his voice trembling slightly, "a producer wants to work with me." I felt a surge of pride, remembering the little boy who used to strum on his toy guitar. But then came the part that brought tears to my eyes, "But I don't want to leave you alone." His voice was thick with concern, and I could see the weight of responsibility on his young shoulders. It reminded me of when his father left, how Gabriel had tried to be the man of the house at such a tender age. I listened carefully, my heart swelling with love for this beautiful, caring son of mine. I summoned all my strength to give him an encouraging smile, despite the tubes and wires surrounding me. "Gabriel," I said softly, "this sounds like a wonderful opportunity." I reached out to take his hand, feeling its warmth against my papery skin. "Don't let fear hold you back," I continued, thinking of all the times I'd let my own fears limit me. I took a deep breath, wincing slightly at the pain in my chest. "I'm recovering," I assured him, even as I felt the weakness in my body. I looked into his eyes, seeing the little boy and the man he was becoming all at once. "You don't need to put your life on hold for me," I said firmly, hoping he could hear the love and conviction in my voice.
Gabriel pondered Laura's words. He knew she had always supported him unconditionally. However, the idea of moving forward while she was still in the hospital made him uneasy. Yet at the same time, he felt this opportunity could be a crucial step in his music career. After thinking it over for a night, Gabriel decided to accept Roger's invitation to meet. Gabriel met Roger at a local cafe. It was a quiet environment, ideal for an important conversation. Roger enthusiastically presented his ideas. He wanted Gabriel to record an EP at his record company and participate in several music events. "You have a talent that needs to be shared with the world, Gabriel. We can help you reach a wider audience," Roger explained. Still hesitant, Gabriel expressed his concerns. "This all sounds incredibly amazing, but my mother is my priority right now. She's recovering from a stroke, and I need to be there for her," he said. Roger nodded understandingly. "I completely respect that, Gabriel. We can find a balance that works for you," he assured. Roger's enthusiasm and understanding put Gabriel at ease. He began to realize he could pursue his passion for music without neglecting his mother's care. "I'll think about your proposal. I need to be sure I'm doing the right thing," Gabriel said. His mind was full of possibilities and questions. Returning to the hospital, Gabriel sat by Laura's bedside and held her hand.
As I lay there in the hospital bed, I felt Gabriel's hand in mine, warm and strong. His eyes were filled with a mix of excitement and worry that tugged at my heartstrings. "Mom," he began, his voice a blend of hope and hesitation, "Roger seems to understand our situation." I felt a wave of relief wash over me, remembering my own struggles balancing dreams and responsibilities at his age. Gabriel continued, explaining that Roger had said they could adjust the plans as needed. A smile spread across my face, despite the fatigue that seemed to seep into my very bones. I squeezed his hand, feeling the calluses from hours of guitar practice against my palm. "I believe you'll make the right decision, Gabriel," I said, my voice filled with the pride and love that had been growing since the day he was born. I took a deep breath, wincing slightly at the lingering pain in my chest. "Your music is important," I continued, thinking of all the times his melodies had lifted my spirits, even in this sterile hospital room. I looked into his eyes, seeing the little boy who used to play air guitar in the living room and the man he was becoming. "I want you to chase your dreams," I said firmly, pushing aside the selfish part of me that wanted to keep him close.
Laura's words of encouragement inspired Gabriel to accept Roger's offer. He felt a mix of excitement and nervousness as he stepped into this new phase of his career. It was a step into the unknown, but he felt ready to face the challenges ahead. Over the next few days, Gabriel worked with Roger to plan the EP recording. He also spent time with Laura in the hospital, sharing his progress and seeking her guidance. The music he had composed for her was nearly complete, and he planned to include it on the EP as a tribute to the unconditional love and support she had always given him. The release of Gabriel's EP marked a turning point in his career. A combination of growing popularity on social media and Roger's professional expertise quickly gave the EP momentum, captivating a wide audience with its authenticity and emotion. The song dedicated to Laura especially resonated with listeners, becoming a symbol of their shared journey of love and sacrifice. Despite the success, Gabriel had mixed feelings. All the interviews, praise, and moments of recognition were overshadowed by Laura's condition. He visited the hospital regularly to share new developments in his career, but his heart was heavy with worry and guilt about living his dream while his mother fought for her health. During one such visit, after excitedly recounting a glowing review of the EP, Gabriel noticed Laura's weak smile.
I lay there in my hospital bed, feeling weaker than ever, but my heart swelled with pride as I listened to Gabriel. His eyes sparkled as he excitedly told me about the glowing review his EP had received. I could see the passion radiating from him, reminding me of when he first picked up a guitar as a little boy. Despite my fatigue, I managed to smile, hoping it conveyed all the love and pride I felt. "You're doing it, son. I'm so proud of you," I whispered, my voice barely audible over the hum of hospital machinery. Each word was a struggle, but I needed him to hear this. I felt Gabriel's warm hand envelop mine, his musician's calluses rough against my papery skin. I saw tears welling up in his eyes, and my heart ached for him. He confessed that he'd give anything to trade his success for my health.
Gabriel received a message on his cell phone during this period of complex emotions. The message shook his world even further. It was from his father, Kyle, a man who had only existed in Laura's sparse stories and faded photographs kept in a box. In the message, Kyle expressed his desire to meet Gabriel, stating that he had been following his budding career with admiration and pride. "I want to see you, Gabriel. There's so much unsaid, and I think it's time," he wrote. Holding his phone, Gabriel felt a whirlwind of emotions. Curiosity about the father he never knew mingled with feelings of resentment over his absence. Why now? Why after so much time? And just as his career was about to take off, Gabriel waited nervously at a cafe, pondering the man who would give a face to the story of his life and absence. When Kyle appeared, there was an air of tension mixed with attempts at charm. "Gabriel, son," he began in a soft voice. "I've been waiting for this moment for so long." Initially skeptical, Gabriel responded cautiously to the greeting. "Why now, after all these years?" he asked, trying to gauge Kyle's true intentions. Kyle sighed, a look of regret crossing his face. He explained that he had wanted to find Gabriel earlier, but Laura hadn't wanted him to approach. He had respected that. She had wanted to protect Gabriel. Kyle continued, saying he had always wanted to be part of Gabriel's life. "When I saw you succeeding in music, I realized I couldn't wait any longer. I want to be a part of that. I want to know you, son." Gabriel's heart stirred. Kyle's words were unexpected, but there was a hint of sincerity. Perhaps there was a part of the story he didn't know. They continued their conversation. Kyle talked about his own music career, his travels, and how he had often thought about Gabriel. "I always wondered how you were, what you were doing. I'm sorry I wasn't there," Kyle confessed. Gabriel listened, a whirlwind of emotions enveloping him. This man, his father, brought answers to old questions, and perhaps a bridge to a past Gabriel didn't know. Gabriel's initial skepticism began to give way to curious hope. Gabriel decided to deepen the conversation. "About music, Dad. How do you see my career?" he asked, curious about Kyle's perspective. Kyle smiled, his eyes shining with what seemed like genuine enthusiasm. "There's something special about your music, Gabriel. It's moving and pure. When I first heard it, I knew you'd go far. and with my experience, I might be able to push your career even further." Gabriel tilted his head, considering Kyle's words. "You want to help with my music?" he asked, a spark of optimism mixing with uncertainty. "Of course," Kyle quickly replied. "Look, I've got a lot of connections in the industry. I can open doors, introduce you to influential people. It's rare to see talent like yours come along." There was something about the way Kyle spoke, the slight emphasis on opportunities and connections, that made Gabriel pause. A subtle doubt began to form in his mind. "That all sounds incredibly amazing, but I'm content with the path I'm on now. I already have a producer, and I'm doing things my own way," Gabriel said. Kyle looked a bit surprised, perhaps expecting a more enthusiastic response. "I understand, of course. But think about the possibilities, Gabriel. With my support, you could reach bigger audiences much faster," Kyle insisted, a hint of urgency creeping into his tone. Gabriel thought for a moment, an uneasy feeling settling in his heart. "Dad, tell me more about your career. Did you ever reach where you always wanted to be?" Gabriel asked, trying to understand the man before him. Kyle hesitated, his expression shifting for a moment. "Well, there were glory days," Kyle began with a nostalgic tone. "After I left your mother, there was a time with plenty of money and women, thanks to the music. Concerts, parties, the life many dream of. But you know how success in the music industry can be. It's fleeting. I had a short period of prosperity, but I couldn't elevate it to something bigger. I got caught in a cycle of gigs and missed opportunities." Gabriel listened carefully to Kyle's words. He painted a picture of a man who had lived in the moment without thinking of the future. "So you had chances. You tasted success, but didn't know how to maintain it," Gabriel thought aloud, his skepticism growing. "That's right," Kyle agreed, seeming relieved that Gabriel understood. "That's why I want to help you, Gabriel. I see the potential in you that I had. But you have the advantage of learning from my mistakes. I didn't have a mentor. That's why I lost everything. But together, we might reach the stars I missed." Gabriel detected something ironic in the way Kyle talked about using his experience to help Gabriel. It felt more like an attempt to ride on Gabriel's rise than a genuine desire to guide him. "So in reality, you want to live the career you couldn't achieve through me," Gabriel concluded, an uncomfortable clarity forming in his mind. "You're not here to make up for lost time or to be my father. You're just trying to piggyback on my success." Kyle tried to interrupt, but Gabriel continued. Gabriel left the cafe with his final words, carrying a mix of sadness and determination. He left Kyle alone with his unrealized intentions. On his way back to the hospital, Gabriel reflected on the encounter. Now there was no doubt in his mind. Kyle was interested only in Gabriel's budding success, not in genuine reconciliation. This painful revelation solidified Gabriel's resolve to move forward with those who had truly loved and supported him from the beginning. With the decision from his meeting with Kyle weighing on his mind, Gabriel entered the hospital room to find Laura awake.
As I lay there in my hospital bed, I saw Gabriel enter the room. His face was a storm of emotions, and my heart ached for him. My eyes might have been tired, but they were filled with love for my boy. He sat beside me and took my hand, and I could feel the turmoil in his touch. "I met him, Mom," Gabriel began, his voice trembling like a leaf in the wind. My breath caught in my throat as I realized he was talking about Kyle. And I saw the truth. He didn't want to be my father. He just wanted to piggyback on what I'm building. I squeezed Gabriel's hand, feeling tears well up in my eyes. "Oh, my darling child," I whispered, my voice barely audible over the hospital machines. "I'm so sorry. He's just a stranger. Don't let a stranger steal your peace." I took a shaky breath, memories of the past threatening to overwhelm me. "You owe him nothing, and he's not worth your sadness. But you, my precious boy, are strong. I looked into his eyes, seeing the little boy I once cradled and the man he'd become. And you have a pure heart. I'm so proud of the man you've grown into. I saw tears rolling down Gabriel's cheeks, and my heart broke for him all over again. He confessed that he had wished things were different, that Kyle had been a different person. With what little strength I had left, I raised my hand to caress his face. You have something he could never possess, Gabriel. A heart full of love and a soul overflowing with music. That's worth more than any fleeting success. In that moment, I saw understanding dawn in Gabriel's eyes. He stood up and picked up the guitar he had brought with him. As he began to play the music he had created for me, I felt a warmth spread through my tired body. He explained that his successful song was because of everything I had done for him, always being both a mother and a friend. It had simply been born from within him and become reality. As the melody washed over me, I closed my eyes, overwhelmed with gratitude and love. Thank you, Mom, he said, and in those simple words, I heard a lifetime of love. As Gabriel began to play, I felt my heart swell with emotion. Each note, each word was a tribute to the love and sacrifices I had made for him. Tears streamed down my face as I listened, overwhelmed by the depth of feeling in his music. The room filled with his melody, soft yet powerful, a song of eternal love and gratitude. You're my light, my guide. In every note, every day, he sang, his voice trembling with emotion. I could hear the years of our shared struggles and joys in each word. It took me back to the nights I'd spent rocking him to sleep, humming lullabies that now seemed to echo in his music. As the last notes faded away, our eyes met, filled with a deep bond and love that no words could fully express. I felt a surge of pride and joy that almost made me forget the pain in my tired body. With a smile, I whispered to him, my voice barely audible over the hospital machines. I told him that I hadn't stopped being an artist after all, that he was my masterpiece. The words came out with a chuckle, a moment of lightness in the heavy atmosphere of the hospital room. I assured him that I would always be with him, in every note and melody he created.
Gabriel spent the following days by Laura's side, gaining strength with each shared moment. As time passed, Laura's health began to improve, bringing great relief to Gabriel. The day Laura was discharged from the hospital was filled with tears of joy and a sense of renewal. Returning home, their life resumed with a new perspective. Though still frail, Laura radiated an inner strength that inspired Gabriel. He continued his musical journey, infusing each performance and new song with the wisdom and love inherited from his mother. With Laura's support, Gabriel looked to the future with determination and hope. Regardless of what the future held, he knew his mother's melody would resonate in his heart, guiding him through music and life. Laura's love and lessons would be his eternal inspiration. It was a perfect harmony between mother and son, bound by music and an unbreakable bond of love. If this story has touched your heart, we'd be honored if you could give it a like. We'd also be delighted if you could subscribe to our channel. Your engagement inspires us to deliver new, moving stories more frequently. The next wonderful story will soon be available on your screen. Stay tuned. We deeply value your support. Until we meet again,